Today we're taking a look at Accurascale's 00 scale British Rail Class 37 diesel locomotive. This is the Lord Hinton in the BR large logo livery. So let's start here in the front. So in the front on top we've got 2 horns, 3 windows in the cab with some windshield wipers, an antenna on the end which does stick out, some warning labels, a pair of headlights, some marker lights on the sides, and a center headlight. If you look closer you can see some molding detail around all the lights, road number on the side, and these white tip lamp irons to hold lamps. There also is a sandbox filler hatch on the side. Now let me know if you guys know what this red square is for, and these tiny blue stars to signify its coupling code. Then we have their version of the MU cable, and there are a lot of holes in the buffer beam which can add some optional detail parts which I'll show you later on in the video. So a cool feature I didn't know about this was that the buffers are actually functional, so they are spring loaded. This model uses tension lock couplers which are quite common in 00 scale. They just consist of a hook and a loop. Alright, so now let's rotate this and take a look at the side. The end is painted in yellow, then we have 2 vents in the front, the side cab window, and the cab door which has a silver door handle, grab irons on the side, and some tread plates which are finely textured, and some footsteps at the bottom. This model also comes with a cab interior which is nice, but the outside part, the printing is a bit sloppy. You can see it smudging on the top. Now here's a look at the interior. You can see there are 2 seats for the crew. It looks pretty realistic, and check out the windshield wipers. Then we have this vent on the side with a diagonal bar in it. Here's how it looks like in the light. The vents are not see-through. Now this locomotive is named after Lord Hinton. He was a British nuclear engineer who supervised the construction of the world's first large nuclear power plant. You can also add in this metal nameplate on the side. I'll do that later in the video. Then we got the road number. Notice it has class 37 in it. Some more details. And apparently this symbol means it's a lifting jack point. So here's the truck. The bearing caps are painted in yellow with red springs, white pipes at the top, and there are chains to connect to the bogie, and they use real links. Now one thing a little off is the bearing caps. The yellow, it's kind of fading at the edges, so it looks kind of greenish. And same with the other ones, it's not exactly perfect. There are some tiny text talking about the class 37.4, the lube oil fill here, another lifting jack point, and lots of other small details. So moving further down along, we have 2 fuel tanks at the bottom. Now interesting fact, the original class 37 had a water tank, but they later converted it to an extra fuel tank. Under here we have the fuel fill as well as a sanding line, sandbox fill above, and a fuel gauge. In the middle there's a hidden door, some warning labels, more plumbing detail at the bottom. Then we have 3 large vents here, some more vents at the top which vary in size. Then we have the large British Rail logo. Now this is actually a heritage unit owned by DRS, as the real British Rail was split up. Then we have a window here and a vent below. Then we have a repeat of the front in the back, as there are cabs on both sides. It's pretty much identical as far as I can tell. Everything looks to be in the same place. The only difference is that on this side there is a wire going to one of the axles. That is the axle generator for the speed recorder. I've also noticed that there's this thin orange line that wraps around the body from the windshield all the way across to the other side. But overall it's pretty symmetrical. So now let's go check out the roof detail. So if you look at the hood, there's some doors on top with some black anti-glare paint, and the horns are actually 2 different lengths. Then we got the small bump here, the radiator fan which has a nice see-through grille. The fan is painted in red and there's some rivets around it. Then we got some rooftop hatches, more panel detailing on top, and the other side's the same thing. So the roof is actually detachable. It's held by these 6 magnets, and there are 2 holes in these panels. And here's what it looks like inside. You can add in a DCC decoder here. Now let's go check out the bottom detailing. So here's what the truck looks like. It says Accurascale, and there's actually detail on the inner face of the fuel tanks, screw here, and some more detail throughout. And the other side's pretty much the same thing. So here is the detail pack. Here are all the parts that it comes with, and now let's go install them. So first I put it in my ESU locomotive cradle and took out the coupler, which is held by these 2 prongs. So now you can see the NEM socket is empty, and you can actually cover this up with the center plow, although I did have to shave off the ends for it to fit in. And this one was actually just a friction fit. Alright, so after applying all the details, here's what it looks like. So I added a bunch of air hoses and cables, the coupling chain, and the plows. Now this curved piece was actually the most difficult to install because you have to connect it in 2 separate segments. So I recommend just doing one at a time. But overall, it looks a lot nicer with these installed. Here's the bottom. I also added the nameplate. Here's before and after. It is a subtle difference, but makes it look more realistic. Now on the other side, I messed up really bad. I just accidentally put in too much glue. Now there's actually a second type of plow if you guys want to use the tension lock coupler couplers. It's just one big piece that moves along with the coupler as you rotate it around. I actually did customize mine by painting some parts of it black. It does blend in nicely, so it looks like it's separate pieces, but it's actually one big piece. This plow is also easily removable from the NEM socket, so here's what it looks like. In comparison with the original one, definitely looks a lot better. You can also fit in a coupler chain, just hook it up on itself. Now here are all the pieces that I decided not to use. You can also drop the chain so it lies in front of the plow. So I bought my scale trains ET44 GEVO in HO scale just to compare it to 00 scale. You can see they're using two different systems for the couplers. We got knuckle couplers for American, while the British use buffers and chains. They also rely on tension lock couplers, which are not prototypical. And the American locomotive is still taller than the Class 37. Even though 00 scale is larger than HO, the British have a smaller loading gauge in comparison to the US. Lengthwise, they're pretty similar, just the Class 37 is a bit shorter. And weight-wise, the Class 37 is pretty hefty. It's on par with the GEVO. It comes with 4 chain couplers and brake hoses, as well as tension couplers. Now I did learn you can't really combine these two couplers together or else they're going to interfere. The same issue with the brake hose. So this is the Accurascale FNA-D Nuclear Flask Carrier. Basically, it just transports nuclear waste from power plants inside this container. So let's start here in the front, where we have this metal railing, lamp irons at the bottom. I also was surprised the buffers are actually not perfect rectangles, but are curved on top. They are also spring-loaded. And there are holes for the detail parts, or you can add in a tension lock coupler which looks like this. So now let's go check out the side. Here we have a code for Great Britain, lots of printed labels and information about the car, including max elevation, and on the bogie there is a white brake wheel on the side. Very nice molded in detailing, and it does have yellow rotating bearing caps. Down here we have some tiny text. I can't read it, but I believe it has to do with the air brake system, and there's a release rod at the bottom, and in the middle there's some more detailing, some placards, one with a nuclear radiation symbol, and a white line in the middle. And on the side there's a lock for the nuclear flask. It is a separately applied piece. Some more data information here, and some small printing on the bogie as well as the car. Alright, so on this side we have a tail lamp on the lamp iron. You can actually light it up, I'll show you later in the video. And on this side I added the chain coupler, and this is how the chain looks like dropped down. It actually almost touches the ground. Now for the other side, it's pretty much identical. The only difference I could find is that this part right here says ICD, and here is the front. Alright, now let's go check out the roof. So on top, the floor has a nice texture to it. It's also quite solid, so it feels like one big piece. The top of the sidewalls are painted silver, and here's where the magic happens, where you put the nuclear material inside. Some nice molding detail. In the front, we got the car number, hazard symbol, and if you look at the bottom container, you can see some teeth. There also is a small notch right here. So this side has a large triangle support, while the other side is a lot smaller. This side also has 3 platform planks here, while there's none on the other side. On top, it says car number 9004. There's some molded in detailing, and holes in the corners. This side also has these little lines sticking out on the side walls, not present on the other side. I think it's a railing that they slide the flask over. Alright, so now let's go check out the bottom. In the corner you can see a wire. This attaches to the lamp, and here's how the buffers actually stay inside. Here's the movement of the bogie. Then we got an air reservoir tank and some plumbing for the air brake system. There's also this separate rod which I think should connect to it, but it doesn't. So here's the other car in the pack. It's basically the same thing. It just doesn't have a tail lamp and the numbers are different. So here's how the cars would couple together. And here's the spring-loaded buffers in action. So now that we unboxed everything, let's go run some trains. So apparently you can use a magnetic wand to turn on the taillight, which I already have a Rapido Trains one, so I tried that, but it doesn't actually work. So apparently you need two CR927 batteries, which are not included. So I had to order one off Amazon because in stores they don't sell them. So when you're taking off the lid, make sure you don't break these little pieces because they're fragile. And here's where you insert the batteries. Now as soon as you put in the batteries, the taillight actually turns on right away and starts blinking. It is a pretty cool feature, and with batteries it doesn't really rely on the track. And at first I thought there was no light bleed, but if you turn off the lights you'll see there is a little bit. Alright, so now that we have the batteries inside, we got our wand, and to switch it off you just wave it on the side. And if you want to turn it back on, just wave it again. Here's a close-up view of it. I just noticed there's a handle on top and a red square underneath it. Definitely a nice touch to this model. Apparently these Accurascale coupler hooks are magnetic, so they are attracted to the wand. The chain couplers, however, are not. And if you're wondering how I attach the train together, I just put the hook inside the knuckle coupler. It ain't pretty, but it does work. Accurascale is a relatively new model railroading manufacturer, and they aim to be the most realistic with highly detailed models. The Class 37 is my favorite British diesel locomotive, and this model is an excellent representation of it. Tiny details all around. There's a lot of things I've learned just owning this model, like stars for the coupling code, why the Class 37 has two separate fuel tanks, the jack and lift point symbols, the fact that spring buffers are a thing, and the motor runs quite smooth like butter. It's also quite heavy, so it has a lot of traction power to pull, as good as any HO scale locomotive I have. Now for the cons, it does have a detail pack, but you do have to do it yourself, and sometimes it's a little bit fiddly, sometimes you have to shave it down for it to fit. There was also some paint smudging on my model, and the bearing caps are a little bit off on the edges. As for the nuclear flask wagons, they look pretty nice, and it's actually quite prototypical for having short length trains. The RS Class 37s do pull them even a single car by itself. Oftentimes modern British trains I've seen online usually are unit trains, and they have the same exact car over and over again, so this could be a nice way to get around that to have a legit consist without buying a lot of cars. Now I was surprised I did have to buy batteries just for the tail lamp, which I think is a pretty cool feature. Unfortunately I did not have them on the day I filmed, and I had to order it online because they are not in stock in stores. Also, the way you open up the container, the handles holding it are very fragile. I recommend you don't hold it from the top or else it'll eventually come off. But overall I think Accurascale did a pretty great job. Hopefully we'll see them do more projects in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, hit the like button down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.